Hey there, everyone, and welcome to part 2 in our video series on relationship astrology. As I mentioned in video 1, I'm going to talk in this video about Venus in your birth chart making aspects to either Uranus, Neptune, or Pluto. So if you have a Venus in aspect to one of the 3 outer planets in your birth chart, you're going to want to stick around for this video. I do talk all about relationship astrology in my online training course, which is called Relationship Astrology and Intro course. So if you do want a lot more detail about this technique and all the other techniques that can help you understand compatibility and connection in astrology, do check that course out and I'll pop the link below. So in the first part of this video series, I introduced the idea of how important it is to kind of get to know Venus in your birth chart, not just by sign and house, but also looking at the aspects she makes so that you can get a sense for the real feel and flavor of what Venus is kind of imprinting within your chart and how that might connect to some of your relationship experiences. I know a lot of our focus in relationship astrology is on understanding romantic relationships and love dynamics, but do keep in mind that relationship astrology goes beyond just the love and relationship space. It can also tell us about how you interact with people professionally, or what you're looking for in your close friendships, or the kinds of family connections that will also work for you. So just keep in mind that when we talk about relationships, it's not just limited to romantic love. Okay, so we've already covered Venus in the birth chart in aspect to Jupiter and Saturn. If you missed that video, I hope you will check it out, and I'll put the link to that below in case you haven't seen it yet. So we're going to dive right in this video by talking about Venus in aspect to Uranus. In the first video, I also talk a little bit about what kind of aspect Venus might be making to one of these planets and how that might be relevant. So if you need a refresher on that, check out part 1 of this video too. So without any further ado, Venus-Uranus aspects, here we come. So these are relationship aspects that indicate a need for excitement. So this could be if Venus in your chart is conjunct, square, sextile, trine, or even opposite Uranus in your birth chart. So Venus in aspect to Uranus can show that you might want a lot of excitement or a lot of stimulation in your relationships. It can also show that you might want this love with a twist, or you might seek out relationships or partners where there is an unconventional quality, or where you're perhaps stepping outside the social or cultural tendencies that might have been held up as ideals. So Venus-Uranus individuals can have a little bit of that rebellious quality where relationships are concerned, or perhaps it's a desire to revolutionize relationships so that authenticity is the key that comes through for you in relationships. Sometimes when you're a Venus-Uranus person, it can be a little bit of a journey in your early relationship life or early adulthood to own the things that you really want from a partner or a relationship, so that you don't feel that you have to conform. It's okay to be different. That doesn't mean better or worse. It just means not like others, if you like. So this can apply in so many situations. Venus-Uranus individuals also need a lot of space and independence. One of my original astrology teachers talked about Venus-Uranus aspects creating what she called a freedom closeness dilemma. And what she's really referencing there is the idea that Venus and Uranus want really different things. Venus wants bonding and togetherness and that sense of cohesive kind of tying together, whereas Uranus wants space and freedom and autonomy and independence. And so when you have Venus and Uranus in aspect in your chart, you're really going to be looking for a partner or relationship situations that allow you to have this kind of time together, time apart dynamic. So that you want a partner who's really sure of themselves or comfortable with themselves. When you're a Venus-Uranus person, there can be a quality of self-reliance. Like, I don't need the togetherness. I can enjoy it when we have it and it's really interesting, but I don't want to feel like my wings are clipped in that relationship. So a relationship or a setup where you get that time to pursue your own interests is really important. So Venus Uranus individuals might have one of those relationships where they do some things with their partner, and then they have time to go off and maintain their own social networks or sporting interests or professional networks. So you don't want to be all connected all the time. One of the ways we see this, one of the ways I've seen this show up for clients that's really functional is when we have couples dealing with like a long distance kind of relationship, or when we have couples where one person might have an unusual work schedule. So one of you might have kind of a 9 to 5, more consistent, reliable work schedule, and the other partner might have shift work or night work or weekend work. And so we get this sense of, even with the scheduling, we get some time together, but we also inherently or naturally get some time apart. And of course, if you've ever been in a long distance relationship, you know that can be a huge part of the back and forth that goes with that. So there's a beautiful quote from Khalil Gibran, which I love, about Venus Uranus aspects in relationships. And this is, let there be spaces in your togetherness, and let the winds of the heavens dance between you. And it's sort of a reminder, and it's really important when you're a Venus Uranus person, when you have this kind of aspect dynamic in your own chart, that you want to have that breathing room so that you can still be your own person. You can maintain your individuality while still exploring what connection or closeness might look like for you. Routines are not really appealing to Venus Uranus people. So one of the lot of pieces that I have about this is that the routine of daily life can dull the edge of romance if you're a Venus Uranus person. So rather than looking for a regular ritual like a standing date night or the same holiday in the same place every year, if you're a Venus Uranus person, you might prefer or enjoy to have this kind of constantly changing approach where there's a bit of spontaneity or spur of the moment or last minute or here's a surprise kind of thing. So giving yourself that space to really play around with the excitement and the novelty and keeping things fresh and new. Venus Uranus people have a lot of curiosity about what they might desire or where pleasure might come from. And so they're really open to trying different things. And if that's you, I hope you've got that sense of giving yourself permission to not get locked in to doing things the same over and over again. Now, if you're a Venus Saturn person, which I talked about in the previous video, you might love that repetition and that consistency, but that's the difference between Saturn and Uranus when they're aspecting Venus in our charts. So let's talk a little bit about Venus in aspect to Neptune in the birth chart. So this creates a very kind of soulful, compassionate, very creative, very spiritual type of desire in our heart. So if you're a person who has your natal Venus in aspect to natal Neptune, you might be someone who's really craving this kind of total merging and complete closeness with another individual. Finding ways to do that in a way that is healthy and functional is going to be your mission when it comes to love and relationships. One thing, if you are a Venus in aspect to Neptune individual, one thing you probably know you have to be careful of is kind of falling in love with love, that you can be so deep in your craving for closeness and togetherness that you might overlook some practical things that could be a bit of an issue down the track. I always give a couple of pieces of advice to my Venus Neptune clients. And one of those pieces is to slow things down early in the romantic piece or the getting to know someone space. And this can apply in friendships or family dynamics or professional associations as well. Because when you're a Venus Neptune person, that desire to be close, to be bonded, to be part of another person's experience can override some of the logic or even the practicalities about time constraints and how much energy you really do or don't have. So I always encourage Venus Neptune people to go slower at the start so that you have time to try and see if there are any warning signs or like flashing orange symbols that might say, we need to consider this. If you're a Venus Neptune person, the best fit kind of relationship for you is going to be one where there's a shared connection around art, beauty, or creativity, or where there's a shared sense of devotion to a common spiritual path. so that we're making space for that Venus-Neptune energy in a really functional, nourishing way. And we're not getting swept up in situations where you might sort of feel that your love can rescue or save or heal somebody who might be struggling. So if you're a Venus-Neptune person, so if you have Venus in aspect to Neptune in your natal chart, be really cautious about falling for people, whether it's a friend or a romantic partner, that seem to be struggling, where you might feel like you want to help them, or that you feel like you can make their lives better through your love. Love is a really powerful force, but when we try to use it to rescue others, we can sometimes end up making things so messy and confusing that it just doesn't go where we want it to go. So being a little bit slower in the process of getting to know someone can just make sure that you're bonding under those really rich, soulful, inspiring reasons, if you like, rather than what might turn out to be some of that rescuing, healing piece. So Neptune can bring a really intuitive quality to love and relationships when it's in aspect to Venus in your chart. So you kind of have this sixth sense about what your special people need and when they need it. And your loved ones are going to love that you're always just like there with that extra bit of support or TLC, that tender loving care when they need it. But learning to develop healthy limits with your giving and your sharing of love might be an important piece, so that you're not constantly giving and leaving yourself a little bit depleted. So when you have a Venus-Neptune connection, relationships that have a center around that creative component or that spiritual component can take you into a more functional place and help you protect your own energy, basically. So I didn't say this after the Venus-Uranus aspects that we were talking through, but if you have Venus in aspect to Uranus, or you have Venus in aspect to Neptune, let me know about your experiences with relationships and friendships and family dynamics via the comments below. I do have a blog post that goes into some of these aspect patterns in more detail, and I'll be sure to include the link for that below as well, because really this is just the highlights of each of these different dynamics. There is so much to relationship astrology. There are so many layers and levels to each of these aspects. I could do a whole day workshop just on Venus-Uranus or Venus-Neptune aspects. So we're definitely giving you the intro version, but the taste tester, enough to get you started, to get you thinking along the pathways that will lead to learning and growth and insight for you, which is really what I hope to do with astrology, is help you find a sense of insight or perspective or understanding within your own heart. Now, we would not be able to finish our series on Venus aspects without talking about Venus-Pluto aspects. So let's finish with that. Let me find my notes on that one. Here we go. I always like to have a few talking points just so I don't miss any of the big themes, which can sometimes happen when I get excited from talking. So if you have Venus in aspect to Pluto, you might have Venus conjunct, sextile, square, trine, or opposite Pluto. There is this real need, if you like, for intense, deep, all-consuming love and relationships. We've got to be really careful with power dynamics and control dynamics when we are a Venus-Pluto person, because sometimes we can have this sense of ending up in a controlling situation, or ending up in a situation in which we are being controlled. And whether we're the person kind of doing the controlling or being controlled, that can change at different points in our lives. And so one thing to keep in mind when you have a Venus-Pluto aspect is the myth of Hades, god of the underworld. And the myth here is the one to do with Persephone, where she was kind of captured and drawn into the underworld against her will or against her wishes. And when you're a Venus-Pluto person, you might, particularly early in your life, in your teens or your 20s, some of those early formative relationship experiences, you might find that you have to navigate situations where there are profound choices to be made about the balance between power and control and trust. And so figuring out, do I stay loyal to myself? Do I stay loyal to others? At what cost or at what reward is really important when you're a Venus-Pluto person. There can be a tendency towards obsession or being really kind of feeling that compulsion of wanting that closeness. And it's very common if you're a Venus-Pluto person, if you have Venus in aspect to Pluto in your natal chart, that you kind of connect with people and there can be this magnetic, instant kind of connection. And that can be all-consuming, where you just feel like you're swallowed up by the passion or the desire or the affection between you and another person. And you might think about that in a sexual context, but that can also happen, sometimes you meet a person who's going to be in the friendship space, but there is this real charge or this electricity between you. That can be a bit of a Venus-Pluto thing as well. Honesty and loyalty are really important if you're a Venus-Pluto person. There's something here about you want to know the truth, even if the truth hurts when it comes to managing, interacting with others when you're a Venus-Pluto person. Betrayal is something that Venus-Pluto people tend to very rarely forgive. They have this kind of all or nothing quality, which is we're either all in and I would die for you, or, we're kind of not friends or we're not lovers and we're out of each other's lives completely. There's not a lot of middle ground for Venus-Pluto individuals. So it's like all in, deep loyalty, deep support, like kind of unending connection. But if we're not that, then we're kind of nothing. There isn't a lot of middle ground for Venus-Pluto people. Let me know how you relate to this if you are a Venus-Pluto person. So honesty and loyalty being really important. Wanting that kind of magnetic, intense, compulsive, like I can't get enough quality is also part of the Venus-Pluto relationship experiences. The other piece I wanted to mention, if you are a Venus-Pluto person, you'll often have some great instincts about who is safe to trust and who you want to be wary of giving your trust to. And I would really encourage you to develop a pattern of listening to your gut or listening to your instincts in that regard. So you might have this sort of natural affinity for picking up on inconsistencies in other people's stories. And you might not get it logically, but there's a lot like an unconscious piece in you that's like, I'm just going to have some hesitation here and honor that. But there are other times when your instinct is like, this is a really solid, upstanding person, and you can honor that safely as well. So keeping that sense of honesty and openness, that's really going to be the key to trust and intimacy and togetherness when you're a Venus-Pluto person. So when you start to know this about yourself, you can start to be more clear about requesting this with others or letting other people know, whether it's a friend or a family member or a romantic interest, just what's important to you. So there are a few of the key themes, but certainly not all the themes about Venus in aspect to some of the outer planets. We talked about some of the points of Venus-Uranus individuals who need that freedom or that independence or that space and that kind of permission to just create the right love for you, even if it's different from the kind of love or relationships others might be happening. We talked a little bit about Venus-Neptune aspects and that craving for closeness, the caution about, not seeing some of the things that would be good to see and the importance of slowing down. But Venus-Neptune, that craving and that compassion and that desire to connect creatively or spiritually with others. And then, of course, the Venus-Pluto aspect and that compulsive, magnetic, kind of all-consuming craving for intimacy and trust and connection, but needing to be really careful about who's trustworthy and who's not trustworthy. And a funny little note on that I've learned in my own explorations about understanding relationship dynamics is that when we often talk about trustworthiness, we immediately think about somebody cheating on another person. But in fact, when you look into the relationship therapy or the relationship theory space, trustworthiness is actually best developed or upheld between people by being a person of your word. So by following through on the things that you will say you do and being really clear so that you don't make it seem like you'll do something that you know you won't. So trustworthiness might not be quite what you think. So with that Venus-Pluto aspect, if that's you, being with someone who really has that follow through can be so important. Anyway, I've taken enough of your time today. I know I can spend hours talking about aspects in astrology because it's such an important part of astrology, but particularly in this relationship space, which we're all trying to understand ourselves better so that we can have better connections and interactions with others better as well. So let me know your experiences with some of these aspects of relationship. What aspects, what planets are aspecting Venus Venus in your chart and how you see them showing up, let me know via the comments below. If you do want a deep dive into these techniques, into synastry techniques, into temperaments in astrology and relationship, and into timing in relationship and compatibility astrology, check out my course, Relationship Astrology and Intro course. And if not, that's no problems at all. I'll be back again with more here on YouTube and on my website, kellysastrology.com. Until then, team, take care.